You're listening to the Makey Words Podcast.
You're finding out 10 years late. What do you think about that? It's the business model. It's the business model. And we just looked at each other, horrified.
Well, since we're all here, we could kick it off by asking why space funk? You know,
that's like a 30-minute answer. I don't know if that's
whatever. We got time to kill. That's what we're doing here. But I don't know. I guess I'm hoping we can have a conversation to how we arrived, or how you arrived on the sound, the departure from the axe and kind of all of it.
Before we do this, though, just for the sake of anyone watching and for anyone that is maybe missed other episodes, you're talking about Antimai, right?
I am talking about Antimai.
Okay, so you're talking about the sonic
before
change
that
of
was
direction
the Indigo Child.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
But I want to say it was late 2016, early 2017, and I was thinking about like what would be the next project that we would do, and just kicking around like, do we want to do something conceptual or non-conceptual? And I had an idea for like the first thing that I had an idea about was a really simple bit of like imagery, which is that typical like vaporwave landscape, wireframe, neon kind of landscape. And so I think at first the first place my mind went was like music from the movie Drive.
Yeah,
like that was the first thing that I thought about, was music from the movie Drive. And then the more and more like I thought about it, it was like, okay, well, I've always wanted to revisit the Indigo EP sound. So then it kind of turned into that. And then it was like, well, what can this project be called that is like at least a nod to Indigo from the color spectrum? And then being vaguely aware of Indigo Children, the concept of it, the like metaphysical new wave bullshit nonsensical concept of Indigo Children.
But what is
like
that?
That's basically like autistic kids who they think have superpowers because they didn't know what autism or the spectrum was.
Gotcha.
That's effectively what it is. It's children who need.
That's definitely a shortened version, but that's
because at the end of the day, what it is children who, because of their neurodivergence, appear to more whimsically minded people to be like enhanced human beings. So the idea of Indigo Children is that this was like the next step of human evolution, and it was being shown through these children. It takes like a startling. How far back does what go?
Like the concept of an indigo.
60s or 70s, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I was picturing when people needed to explain like the sun is a god.
No. It's very, very recent in human history.
Okay.
Which it takes like a startling lack of knowledge of evolution and psychology and all of these things. But anyways, it was just like I wanted to do a project, and it was like there's something there to investigate. And then the more and more I dug into that concept, the way it could be represented through a concept record and like the kind of story that I wanted to tell, I sat and started like writing out the story, and then it just became like I was writing a story and I wasn't thinking about the records or anything like that. So the idea of it being like I have to make something that can then be represented by the exact style of music from Indigo, that wasn't really on the table anymore as far as what I was concerned about doing. So that opened up like a bit of a vacuum of space of like, well, what other kinds of music would be great to juxtapose with this kind of story that maybe is like a little, what's the word? The word that I'm thinking of is nonsensical, but that's not what I want to say. That's like the exact opposite that I want to say. But like when you think of sci-fi, you either think of cinematic score orchestral music, or you think of like Rush and Coheed. You think of these two different lanes you can go down, which is like very proggy, heavier music, right?
Yeah.
Or this very serious cinematic John Williams, everything flows downward from John Williams and Lawrence of Arabia and stuff like that. But I was thinking like it'd be a lot more fun to have a more like eclectic sound.
I remember you saying that you had at least with when you had the more of a higher concept in mind rather than let's just make a record, and when you started kind of formulating the idea of it, you were saying I don't want an orchestra, I just want horns.
Yeah.
Like just like no strings, no
Funky.
no big, yeah, just horn. Like if we're going to use an orchestral instrument, it's going to be brass and that's it. And I remember you talking about where you were about to go with the percussion and stuff, like things you would find in the world.
Tower of Power didn't have strings, man.
No.
You know?
Still don't. No, but that was basically as far as it was thought. And then I at the same time I was like digging into getting back into 3D animation and stuff like that. So like really early on, I would do these really basic concept 3D sketches, basically, of like, I think the first piece of music I wrote was for this like 15-second visual of a spaceship flying through what is a really primitive version of the glass desert concept. I started like scoring that, and then I started messing around more and more with synths for like to kind of get a sound that was somewhere between like Tower of Power, Vangelis, and like I don't know, Sly and the Family Stone, or like just sort of like mixing these worlds that felt like they would be conducive to that music or to that story. And then I focused for a long time just on the story and trying to make something happen with that and the short film and stuff like that. And the short film itself was by no means like really it'd be fun to go back and rescore it, but like at the time that wasn't really the kind of story that would get like the funky treatment, you know what I mean? Like it was a little too serious for that. So the real first attempt at doing something was, I guess, Rings 7 and 8 were written before the Color Spectrum, before the Indigo Child song, but they were sort of put on the back burner because those songs needed to come out first. And that song started as just me sitting upstairs with my acoustic guitar singing that in, the Indigo Child, more like it'd be a song from a Tarantino movie or something like that.
Kind of like how the one that Tivoli ended up singing.
Exactly.
That Tivoli
that's
sang
the one.
on.
Right.
Yeah. And that was like,
that was the version that I recall us at least working on a little bit first or touching on first. I don't remember if it was us in a room together or if it was.
No, I think he just sent it around. That was early COVID, I think, right? Or no, before.
No, it was before.
It would have been before, for sure.
Yeah, because it's at the end of Cycle 8, which we played in 2019 on that tour.
Yeah.
So that was originally written, I think in 2018, I went and I recorded those 2 demo songs, one of which I can't remember if I put it up on Pillar or not. The original,
when I was one?
Yeah. But shortly after that, I think we started getting together and like, I think the first primer for us was learning Ring 8 and Ring 7 for the sake of that Fascio Satio tour. Not that is the event that made everybody like funky like parts and funky beats and jamming and shit like that. It's just that was like, I think as a band, the first event of moving into that kind of music for the project. We learned that, and then after that we were pretty like jazzed on everything, so it was like, okay, we're gonna get back, because that was pretty late in the year, right? Fascio Satio, was that in fall?
Yeah.
No.
So
also,
afterwards it was like, we're gonna let's get back together early next year and let's write and record this record. Or these 2 records at the time. We were going to try and do both of them at once as one thing.
Right.
Also, to back this up slightly, and I know you kind of already had touched on this. I don't remember, I know, Casey, that you had already touched on this. I don't remember what we were getting together for. And maybe it was just a weird small writing session, but
it was just a writing session. that
Where it was
getting
just
together
you,
randomly.
me, and Sauce.
Oh, that was a production. Like, go over the songs, talk about what other kinds of things we could hear in them. Do you guys hear horns here? Should we
Gotcha.
should we or shouldn't we? That was like defining real estate through the record. And then if we had ideas for synths or anything like that, we would pop them in there.
Right.
I just remember
video on my phone of running the guides intro through a little tape recorder that you had during that session when Rob and Sauce flew out, and that ended up making it on the. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember. Obviously, Ring 7 was one we worked on. Like you said, Glass Desert was already a thing, and I think we didn't really dive into that as much.
Well, but so we're at the time where everyone flies down, and now we're writing for this new concept, and that was, I want to say, February 2020 because
I think it was before that, because I think we left.
I think it was
in
January
February.
through like February 20th or something like that.
I
just
everybody
remember, was just going back for a few weeks,
right?
And then it was gonna be come out, and we had a schedule in mind of how we would finish writing and then record. So it was one of those like, okay, you guys will all come back. Nick gonna stay for 2 weeks. The rest, or like I'm thinking Sauce and Rob were probably gonna stay for an extra week and a half or something on top of that, and then Max, you and I would just finish once they left or something like that. We were gonna do one of those kinds of trips. And I want to say everyone was going to come out on March 6th or something like that. I want to say that was
it was the 8th. I very specifically remember it because I was just getting back from a trip with a friend as well. And I just remember being in Rhode Island, ready to leave. And that was it.
And then we were all texting each other like, hey, are we concerned about this thing?
Here's a question. Knowing everything that you guys know now, what if you could have made that decision differently and just been like, okay, fuck it, I'm just gonna go out, would you have made that decision?
Yeah, because I got COVID, and it was for me it was like whatever,
Yeah, well, you can handle anything.
I'm still glad we didn't get together.
Nah,
for what reason?
Well, the album we made ended up being, I don't know,
because since then everybody has gotten COVID. Maybe not you, Rob. Well, except you definitely got some shit that fucked us up right before this last tour.
That wasn't COVID. I mean, even if it was, whatever.
What scale? It's an arbitrary scale to know was it better or worse. I mean, we've all I'm saying is the rest of us, everybody gets sick. If we all knew that we have gotten it multiple times and none of and we're all still here. That's the knowledge that I'm asking about, like having back then. Hey, if you get it, you're not going. If you personally get it, you're not going to die. That would have changed my understanding of the situation somewhat drastically.
Everyone was scared. It was a weird fucking time, for sure.
It definitely wasn't the situation I'm proposing, today, which is time traveling back from this point to that point in a hypothetical that's completely impossible. It has no weight on anything. It's just if I had that hindsight, because I remember how terrified we all were, and I don't believe that we had a reason to necessarily be terrified. It was a responsible thing to do, but the reason we were all terrified was getting sick.
But so we were all together. The shit hit the fan. Or no, we were all together.
No, we weren't together.
And then when we weren't together and we had already scheduled, I think flights might have already been booked, and everyone was going to get back together to finalize the record. And then everything starts happening, and we all start talking. Should we wait? Should we wait on this? Because I remember it was going to be like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever it was. That was going to be the original quarantine, and then it was all
whatever it was. It was a matter of weeks. It might have been 6 to 8 or something, or like let's rethink this for the summer and get back together.
So during the original writing sessions, right? Gavin, who was on the Fazio Sadio tour with us, he was with us on those writing sessions, and he kind of brought his flavor to the mix. And then in the coming months, when things started to slow down and it was like, holy shit, how long is this all going to last? Gavin decided to go and do his own different thing. He wanted to go a lot of personal ventures or whatever it was.
Well, one of the things specifically, while you're saying with his flavor into the mix, one of the things that I think he was bothered by and that he kind of mentioned to me was that it wasn't getting his flavor into the mix. And that specifically, he was like, if I'm going to be in a band, I think it needs to be a band that I've started. Because
he's a frontman at heart. Yeah.
I don't even know if it's about the frontman thing, even though I do believe he's a frontman at heart. But I think for him, that portion of it in conjunction with all of the other life stuff that was going on. But that portion of it where it's like, is it really worth it for me to go out there and just play like synth lines over these songs?
Part of the reason the record was shelved at this time was I didn't know Gavin's input on that about feeling like he didn't have a flavor. But my recollection, could be wrong, was that you were going over the writing sessions and it was sort of like in your head, you were like, I need to rethink all of the synths and stuff because there's a specific coloring on here that in future albums won't be replicated because it was this person. And
he had recorded about, like, at that point, probably 30% of Antimai on synth. Yeah.
But and to that point, maybe worth mentioning here, just so others know, we were kind of recording as we were going a little bit, as far as just the workflow was concerned and what we were considering to be part of the song.
So, like, I think up until the point you guys left, we had Ring 6, we worked on Ring 5, we worked on Ring 4, and Ring 6 through 3, I think we worked on, and then also the song Sunya, and then also Wasteland, which is now Marauders, both from that record. To echo what you're saying, partially it was that there wasn't a complete record of synths. Like, it's not like I had the finished record and then I was deciding, well, Gavin's gone now, I'm just going to take him out of the record. It was like, there is a timbre that is on this record that isn't even completely on this record. So do I want to finish this record, the other 66 or 70% of synths that are going to go on this record? Do I want to finish it trying to incorporate this sound, knowing that, like you said, in future records, that's just not going to be there at all, unless I am writing synth parts and making synth sounds to honor the 33% made for Antimai. You know what I mean? Indefinitely. So it's like, I think I should go back and like you said, rethink all of these sounds in the timbre and the way everything works together.
But so we truck on with it. Casey trucks on with it, and then you just started sending us things that you were working on, right?
Oh no, it just sat there for a while. I mean, I was working on it alone for a few months, and this is maybe well, no, I think it's worthwhile, just to be honest. One, like, anathema to my creativity is sending demos to the band and not hearing back, or sending roughs to you guys and not hearing anything back. Like sending like 3 or 4 updates in a text to everybody, and then like I check the next day and it's like still people are not saying anything about them. The next day people aren't saying anything about them. So it's like, I know everyone's got shit going on, but for me, I'm like, well, fuck it, I don't want to work on this anymore. So it got to the point where
you did an Honorary Astronaut.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then it was like, well, if this, because it started to feel weird. It started to feel weird of like, does anybody want to do this or not?
Right.
I think, everyone was in their own personal mental spiral back then.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we had kind of taken 2018 or like about a year off, basically. And we had just started getting back together in 2019. Yeah. And then we did that. And so obviously everybody's dealing this, you know, the band's not the only thing in the universe. Everyone's dealing with their own stuff. But as far as the act of finishing the record and doing it alone, like the only way I can do that is with constant cheerleading, because it is a very lonely process. So unless I'm like sending ideas out, and then I'm immediately getting feedback of like, this is cool, or what if we do this, or those kinds of things, then it's like, okay, well, if all I can control is like the thing I'm doing, then I want to do a thing for a little while that does not rely on the feedback of anybody.
Yeah.
And that's when I did that.
I feel like I remember you saying that you wanted to prove
to myself
yourself
that I was still a musician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Songwriter and all
I
these
fucking
things.
love that album. I'm so happy that it worked out the way it. And sorry.
Now
really
that
quick,
I'm realizing too, I did that record while Gavin was still in the band. So it was even
that's what I
while
mean.
he
like,
was still in the band.
Year?
While he was still, it might have been 2021 when he stopped, and I don't remember personally. I don't think it was right when COVID hit.
Yeah.
So anyways, I did Honorary Astronaut as like an aside. It wasn't like meant to be it wasn't like a career shift or anything like that. It was by all means just like a hobby. Record.
It was pretty successful.
I think doing that record put me in a much better place to then go back and do Antimai, because I just like,
you got it out.
I calibrated basically. I calibrated to do something completely in isolation, and that like recalibrated me to then go back to that record in a way, not of like, well, I don't need you guys, but in the way of like, well, I don't necessarily need them to fuel me to get the record finished, because I know that at the end of the day, once everyone's got their guitar parts done, once everybody's got their parts done in general, unless I come back and I'm like, hey, there's vocal parts, I really want you to sing on this. But once you guys have your parts done, there's very little for you guys to proactively check in on or proactively do. It was just that I was, at the time, I was leaning too hard on needing that feedback. And so that's when I started to like things like, okay, well, the Ring 7 song, I don't have to do what I was doing on that tour. It's okay to like approach this in general with, I guess, like a fresh set of ears and rethink like what is the best from song to song to song. And including going back through all of Gavin's stuff and thinking about if it had a place or if it didn't. And that's kind of where I think there's like 3 parts still on the record where it was like, well, I'm not just going to re-record this. Like, I'm not going to, like, if I take this out, I'm going to want to put this back in. So I'm not going to do that. Then I want to say around that time when Gavin was out and when I was getting more done, that's when you guys came out and we did that like production rundown of like, let's just listen to every song and let's just discuss every idea everybody has and like see if it works or not. Let's just see what anyone comes up with or anyone's instinct. And so we would basically go through and be like, does this part need horns? And if we had an idea, or we would pop it in or, you know, whatever. But a lot of the time it was just defining real estate for that kind of thing. And then that was given to Brian. And
man, I have the best memory, of just you were sending everyone stuff like you do, and you had sent us an arrangement at the end of Middle Class.
Yeah.
And I remember just driving around in my car just with that on loop, like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? Because I think in the stem that you sent us, it was just drums, bass, and horns.
I also want to mention, and I think at this point chronologically, this happened earlier, but for the sake of a historical record and for what would have been drama, if I recall correctly, because of the amount of time it ended up taking for us to start working on everything again, Casey, that you had mentioned scrapping it and starting over.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel
That's
like I
sort of what I
vaguely
was getting
remember
at.
that just being like, yeah, it's been too long since we worked on this project has been around for too long. Do we start with something else?
That's what I was
Like,
saying
I feel
earlier.
like I vaguely remember that.
Was that we had a brief conversation of do we want to continue down this? And then it was
Well, that sounded like, do we want to be a band versus do we want to finish this record
I took that
started.
a different way. I
Yeah.
took that a very different way.
No, yeah.
Okay.
That's sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
I said
I
that
definitely
wrong.
at a certain point was like, I don't really want to do this record.
Yeah.
Because the difficult thing about it is, like, again, the project is conceptualized in early 2017, though Ring 8 and Ring 7 were written in late 2017, early 2018, along with a bunch of other stuff, including, oh man, even before Ring 8 and Ring 7 is that Stormlands, the first half of that Stormlands song from Sunya was written before that, just as a little piece of score. So it's like, it's just sitting around forever. And at the time it was conceived, it was like, this would be forward thinking for us as a band to put out in 2019. It would be forward thinking. And then it's like, okay, in 2020, we're working on it. Okay, we can get this record out this year. And then when it starts to look more and more and more, and like when the whole approach is, I've got to muster up the inspiration to work on this thing that I had that feels dead and now feels behind the curve of what I wanted the band to be doing. It's like, if you think of Antimai as an intermediary between where we were and wherever we will be, by the point it was time to go back to Antimai, it was like, I just want to be where we will be now. I don't want to have to go back to the link between where we were and where I hope we will be, because that should have already happened, and now we should just be working on where we're going to be. So it was like just a I don't know, philosophical, emotional conundrum of, is it worth the amount of time it will take to finish this record that now feels somewhat antiquated, given the kind of music I think the band wants to make? I don't agree with that outlook, but at the time that was like my sensitivity was to that, perspective. But now looking back on it, once the record was completely done, it was very much like the next.
This is it. Yeah.
Though,
man, dude.
To be fair though, too, like we normally, try to work pretty quickly, where we start a project and we see it out. I mean, what other band basically has a sketch of a song, writes the rest of it on a bus, and then records it in someone's house the next day? Like, we tend to move pretty quickly. To the extent that even I was talking to a friend of mine about us getting together and doing all the stuff we're about to be doing, and him just being like, oh man, yeah, I guess I haven't heard a new release from you guys in a little bit. And it made me think like, oh yeah, Sunya's just in the can. Like, that's nearly ready to go. So it's just like, oh yeah, we always have things going on. So for a record to take literal years to be finished is certainly atypical of us.
I think that once Sunya comes out, and at this point,
that wasn't me criticizing that. That wasn't me being
no.
I just forgot. We just are always doing things, and it's like, oh,
but
yeah,
I mean,
even
that is being like, now we have something else new that will come out before that this year. If I had a dedicated 2 months where every day I could wake up and just work on the records that we make, we would have so many more records. But I just don't. I don't have that ability anymore.
Well, so that's so what else happened with Antimai?
How about you wrap it all up? Wrap up Antimai for us.
Yeah, what happened for you during Antimai?
Yeah, I remember I would just get a lot of parts to record to, and recording remotely is one of those things where it's like, these songs were in such a way where, like, I couldn't learn the whole thing all at once and then track to it. Like, I had to, like, for instance, like Ring 6 or Ring 3 and ring one were very specifically like, okay, I gotta like shed these parts for a while and then track those parts because I got to move on to the next part, and I'll probably forget the previous part if I spend all this time focusing on this new thing. So it was very much like piecemeal together. And then this happened a couple of times where it's like I would finally, like after hours, like have learned all these parts and tracked them sequentially. But by the time I got to the end, I could go back and like then like play everything actually pretty well and sometimes a lot better. So I would like track these parts individually, almost like I'm demoing for like the final take when I just
That's what
hit
singing
it
is like for me a lot of the time.
Okay,
That's what doing vocal tracks is like for me a lot. I'll part it out and I'll just be like singing it also while I'm working through the parts. And then by the time I'm done tracking what I think is my main vocal, it'll be like I should just go back and re-sing this all so that it flows together and so that I can basically what you're saying.
Yeah. It wasn't that way like, the entire way through, but there are definitely huge sections that I would just go back and redo entirely after I'd done the rest of the song. So that was interesting for me. It was a lot of learning. I don't know what all the guitar parts were like learning for everybody else, but the bass parts were not easy for me personally. So it was a lot of like okay, I'm taking like the fucking day and getting this song done, and sometimes those songs take me like 6 hours or something like that, which for one song is kind of a lot of time. Although I'm sure vocally it's probably like a 6-hour thing every song too. So.
Oh, dude, it's way more than that. It's
okay,
way more than that.
Well,
just because I'm recording so many of them, but also like, there's still creative work being done rather than just like woodshedding the part, like you're saying. Like I don't have a final part written until I'm done recording. So
yeah,
the songs. It's not that I couldn't. If we went and we toured on a new song, like The Plains, for instance, right? Like. I'm going to delete all of the vocals that are on the version as it exists and go back and sing it again now that we've done it live so much. And that will be a song that I'll probably get the main vocal done in an hour at tops in an hour. Okay.
So I've got sort of a question / something that is actually related to both this and Antimai. Though I don't know if we want to talk about it or not. So I'm going to let me think of how to lead into this. We talked about doing, so I'm fairly certain we've mentioned this here before, but the Indigo Child EP, the two versions of the song were sort of our interpretations of what opening and ending credits would be to like an 80s action adventure movie.
Yeah. Fantasy, sci-fi.
Yes. What we talked about making a soundtrack to that theoretical film.
Music from the motion picture.
Sure. So basically what I was just saying in the chat, and this was kind of going off of what Max was talking about, and someone was just saying how we should all switch instruments and release an EP or something. But we were talking about for that particular project where we were going to write all these other songs for the soundtrack to this movie as different bands, meaning that different people were going to sing on songs and different people were going to do other things. And they were just, hold on, let me pull this up again. Someone said y'all should make an EP where you all take a different instrument and call it the Nature Herd, which is an anagram of the Deer Hunter. But yeah, so it's kind of like fun. That's sort of what that would have been if we had ever brought it to fruition, was playing in different bands together. It would be fun to put out something like that, just called like "This Is What We're Capable Of," or something.
What was it? The what herd?
Even
Nature
if it's
Herd?
terrible. The Nature Herd. Yes,
that's a great band name. I like it.
We just looked at each other, horrified.
Makey words.
They know. My time has come. The algorithm knows. We have fun, okay? We have fun.